Welcome back, members of parliament. We, just before the adjournment, we ended with the Prime Minister preparing for her clarifications in the first round, but just before that, we decided to take an adjournment for lunch, and now we're back. And I would like to now give the floor over to the Prime Minister to give her clarifications in the first round. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to the members of Parliament, Griffier, people of St. Martin, and of course the support staff here with me today. Madam Chair, the internal MP Bryson asked for some clarification on an answer given to MP Rameau related to the internal audit department. I think in the first meeting, when I answered the first set of questions, I'd already gone into that the Internal Affairs Department have a set of audits that they do for a year, and in their policy, it mentions that for IT, they would outsource it. So they do not do that on their own. It's outsourced. And I think we answered quite some questions as to why it hadn't been done, et cetera, et cetera. And so no, it doesn't do it themselves. They don't do it themselves because they don't have the internal expertise. It's outsourced. Regarding payment plans, as I mentioned, it was encouraged from the shareholder. We cannot give such instructions, but of course it was encouraged. And in the beginning, again, I mentioned that it was standard operating procedure. We are ascertaining whether it's a written policy. This is what the IAD has been tasked to do, to assess all internal policies, and those that need to be laid down in writing as just what they were modus operandi already will be determined to be written, set forth, adopted, and shared with the organization so that it is clear what the policy is. So payment plans are something that was a standard thing in GEBE, and that's why we continue to hammer on it, that it continue, and it is happening at this time. Yes, we would like to see it set in stone as well. As far as our role as shareholder, we are, as I mentioned before, the corporate governance review I spoke of is with the I-team from the Trust Fund projects. It started out at the airport, but the goal is that we have an improved corporate governance code, an improved corporate governance ordinance as well, and that is part of the B15 measures, and to establish a corporate governance authority, which would then be the successor of the current Corporate Governance Council, which supports the shareholder in its role as shareholder to the government-owned companies and entities. The ordinance is in draft and is expected to come to the House of Parliament. So no, not some group of people telling us what we have to do. They're making proposals. It will come to Parliament via laws, and Parliament will have their say as well. And of course, the discussion throughout the ages has been that the corporate governance training, we've already established that it needs to be part of anybody's training if they're going to become supervisory board members or directors, but it's also been determined in our discussions that others that have to deal with it, like ministers, members of parliament, and others should also be trained and be open to that training as well, so that everyone understands their roles, and then we maybe wouldn't have the situations that we had in the past. His fourth question was regarding data recovery. The payment was made to Fast Data Recovery, the company that was tasked to decrypt and not for the hack, as may have been misunderstood. And the payment was for the services of what was retrieved, which was for the payroll. I believe the answer on the article of incorporation was given in my previous presentation, that it was indeed April 8, 2014, as has been clarified by Member of Parliament Westcott Williams, and the documents are in the possession of Parliament. MP Westcott Williams asked about what is the structure of the management at NVGB right now. So Mr. Troy Washington is our special representative who is acting as temporary management, and under him, so working directly with him to assess the situation is the crisis team, and to do and a group to do the investigation. So they are working directly with him and the management team, but of course reporting to him, by which he reports to supervisory board and shareholder. MP DeWeaver wanted a repeat of the insurance coverage policy, or the policy, what is covered within the insurance. And I mentioned that it's property, group personal accident, group life, group medical liability, commercial crime, directors and officers, motor vehicle fleet. So that's what's covered in the insurance that they currently have. And I also mentioned that it's being assessed as to what more may be needed. At current time, I think that was clear. It's a concern for us as well that senior relief is not being given. So I guess the bills that they receive is what they will are expected to pay, and we are still looking into ways to alleviate this. As it regards to the financial statements, from the reports that I have received, not just from Mr. Washington, but also from management, because as you know, members of parliament aren't the only ones that were getting phone calls and WhatsApp messages. And yes, I did notice a marked relief where that is concerned. The the special representative of the shareholder at NVGEBE, who's acting as temporary management, from his own words, is getting great cooperation with the management. The management are involved in the assessment and the investigation. And of course, everyone would like to see the company that they love back on solid footing. So everybody is working along as far as I can tell, as has been reported to me. And in terms of the quality of the answers being vague, certain things that are being asked are still being assessed. So I do not want to give any answers that are concrete. That is information that was presented to the Council of Ministers back in August. And what this group of people are doing, this group of people is doing, is ensuring that the documents that we received back then are accurate, one. Two, there's a baseline study being done. There was a risk assessment done also, which we've never seen the report of. So certain things we must be sure when giving information on a public floor that it is actually accurate. So until the assessments are finalized by the investigative and crisis team, I think it would be safe to say that that is the type of answer that would be had. So I did ask for time to be able to get everything in, but I come when Parliament calls. And lastly, I believe with the financial statements, so that is being assessed whether the 2019, the dates of signature and when it was approved, all of that is being assessed. And as soon as we know more, that will be shared as well. And as I mentioned, 2020 and 2021 are being finalized. And the cash burn rate was something that, with his background, Mr. Washington completely understands and explained as well. And again, some data was presented in the documents that we got initially from the former temporary manager, and projections were made. And there was this, let's say this impetus to collect as quickly as possible, because we know what the receivables are. So you know what you need to collect. It is just a matter of getting it in so that you can meet your obligations. So we did see a surge in income in August and a little drop again in September, but also we were paying and keeping up with the bills a little better in September as well. So in that, we're monitoring it, and once the what's it called? Baseline studies finalized, we will be better able to give a clear indication as to the current cash burn rates and how long we can go. Again, encouraging all those who have been enjoying the amenities of light and water to contribute as much as possible, making a payment plan if it is too much at this time based on how long you have waited. And we will, of course, NVGB will be responding to us on this. This is part of what we also want to know as shareholder and government of St. Martin in order to ensure the reliability of service as well as the sustainability of it to the people of St. Martin as a core and key need within the population. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Yes. Thank you, Prime Minister, for your clarifications in the first round. We now go over to the second round, and if I follow the speakers list, the first speaker on the to speak in the second round is MP Sarah Westcott Williams. You have the floor. And remember, yes, 10 minutes in this round. I'm looking at MP De Weaver. 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. A very good afternoon. Thanks to the Prime Minister for the responses to the request for clarifications. Madam Chair Lady, in answering a request for clarification, the Prime Minister indicated that right now we have within the organization/management of GEBE a special representative / temporary manager, interim temporary manager. You have a crisis team and you have an investigative or investigation team. With respect to the interim temporary manager, is the function of the interim temporary manager in accordance with the temporary management, or does the special representation have added responsibilities of the interim temporary manager? So this special representative is constantly added to the name of Mr. Washington, who is the interim temporary manager. So does the part of the special representation to the shareholder have any specific role and responsibilities? If it does, what is the direct responsibility as special representative? And what is the contract with Mr. Washington? A similar question pertains to the crisis team and the investigation team. What is for the lack of a better word, the terms of reference? So time, what are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to deliver? The same question goes for the other two teams. So is it a particular reporting that they have to do within what period of time, etc.? So that's why I use terms of reference. Mightn't be a formal terms of reference, but what is expected of these two teams, in fact the three roles, within what period of time, and what, in the case of Mr. Washington, what is the agreement with him as far as this function is concerned? Madam Chair Lady, the Prime Minister referred to having received from the current management some updates, and even dates were provided. I think one was over the month of September. The Prime Minister did give specific days. Can these updated reports be shared with Parliament? Like, so what happened after the appointment of the temporary manager, etc., etc.? Madam Chair Lady, I would really like to get, and why do I stress it like this, is because I've asked it before, the agreement that the government of St. Martin has entered into with Grid Market. What is this agreement? What is the understanding? What are the expected deliverables, and by whom? If I can get that breakdown, please. We keep hearing about the green the Grid Market and the green and smart, I guess, cities, countries, but what is the specific agreement with Grid Market? Madam Chair Lady, we get now to my next question, and that has to do with the corporate governance changes to be instituted on and for St. Martin. And we heard similar statements with respect to corporate governance as it regarded the airport. Very specifically, when is this legislation regarding a new corporate governance code? When can the Parliament expect it? We keep hearing about it being in the make and coming to come, but in the meantime, when are we going to be at the stage for the corporate governance matter that would then incorporate all government-owned companies that Parliament can say, well, we have something in front of us. We hear about this review being done. Apparently, there are some recommendations. So what is currently the status, very specific, the status of the changes, amendments to come to corporate governance as it pertains to the government-owned companies? And in this context, Madam Chair Lady, we keep hearing about the matter of shareholder rep. There's some difficulty in connection with, having a shareholder rep. What do you do to how do you designate certain tasks to the representative of the shareholder in the different companies? Is it currently still the case that there is no specific shareholder rep for government-owned companies, and the shareholder is the Council of Ministers, is my question. Or is it done on a case-by-case basis? So for this one, today you might have a shareholder rep with a mandate of the COM, and other times it's the COM that makes the decision. So how does it take place right now for all of the companies? And, Madam Chair Lady, the Prime Minister, in her capacity as leader of the government / the coalition, on the 1st of July, made reference to the fact that the government / the coalition was in negotiations with members of Parliament to expand the basis of the government. That is now like what, 3.5 months ago. Is the issue of government-owned companies and shareholdership of government-owned companies one of the issues that is keeping back these negotiations that the Prime Minister referred to, Madam Chair Lady, on the 1st of July that are taking place with members of Parliament? Is this an issue that has not led to concluding these agreements with some members of Parliament, is my question. Madam Chair Lady, the matter of relief to seniors by the company GB, in the words of the Prime Minister, is hanging in the balance. Hanging in the balance meaning what? It has been suspended. If it has, for how long? And what is GB's view in terms of when we might have the financial situation to reinstate the relief for seniors? Madam Chair Lady, are there any other investigations besides the one by the investigative team in GB taking place as far as this government knows? Again, are there any other investigations taking place in GEBE other than the one to be conducted by the investigative team that I asked of before? And finally, Madam Chair Lady, is there any update that can be provided on the relationship with GEBE and government as far as the water part of, or the water company as we call it, of GB is concerned, and specifically whether any headway has been made to review, as we have been told on several occasions in the past that it will take place, and that is a review of the current water agreement that has the, as we call it, take or pay clause in it. We have heard from previous ministers that this matter is being reviewed. In their view, it should be reviewed, but we have not heard anything since. Madam Chair Lady, I want to thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. Next on the speakers list, we have MP Melissa Gums. Geen behoefde? No, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to you, to the FIFIR, my colleagues, and to the Prime Minister and her support staff, and to Mr. Washington representing GEBE. Madam Chair Lady, before I continue, I kind of just want to clarify something for the public. Here on the floor of Parliament, myself included, MPs have been using the term hack as a sort of catch-all for what has happened at GB. I would just like to state again that this is something that goes beyond just a hack. It's a cyber attack. It's a crime that has been committed against our most critical piece of infrastructure. Someone recently told me that, oh, it's simple to solve a hack, so they don't know why it's taking so long. And that's when I realized that I'd messed up in using this very familiar word. You see, when people hear hack, they think of criminal minds, you know, just clickety-clacking on a keyboard and boom, the problem is solved. But that's not what happened. When what happened to GB happens in other countries, the highest authority in the land of the law gets involved. In the FBI, in the US, it's usually the FBI. In Canada, you have the RCMP and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. In the Netherlands, is the National Cybersecurity Centre. And these centers actually work with countries around the world to help them address cybersecurity breaches at their most critical pieces of infrastructure. So I just want to say that because I feel like the sense of urgency with what has happened has kind of died down. GB themselves admitting that, you know, they've no in-house cybersecurity expert personnel tells you that, you know, there's a lot more work to be done. When we last ended this meeting, Madam Chair, the Prime Minister had given us a brief presentation and made some accompanying remarks regarding the structure of GB, the responsibility of government, and the relationship between GB and Parliament. In her remarks, the Prime Minister provided Parliament and the public with a timeline of events starting from the day of the cyber attack to date, well, at the time. Listening to that timeline, though, I only grew more worried because I realized that it did not seem like the shareholder had a handle on what was happening, and whether that was by design or not remains to be seen. Prime Minister, it's with this in mind through you, Madam Chair, that I ask if you could please explain why the Minister of Finance and the Minister of ROMI were the only ministers meeting with GB and Aurora Infotech not once but twice following the cyber attack. In your remarks, you mentioned that on March 25th, 2022, the two ministers met with two members of the Supervisory Board, the interim manager or managers, and Aurora Infotech. And then you further stated that the two ministers met with the SBOD and interim management again on April 1st, 2022, to discuss the status of actions being taken to restore the data and to encourage the collection start to take place. I would like to ask, what did the two ministers report back to the Council of Ministers following those meetings? And I ask these questions because the vibe I'm getting from certain questions and comments made in this meeting is that government should appoint a shareholder rep to be responsible for GB before the corporate governance review and recommendations are completed and received. This is not something I can endorse, Madam Chair Lady, from a corporate governance perspective, having worked in corporations that actually have good governance policies in place, because while some may focus on previous government's issues with rogue ministers, I want to remind the public that up until this public meeting that we're in right now, the de facto shareholder representative was the Minister of ROMI. He came to Parliament to answer questions for a question hour that I requested and had done all previous communications regarding GEBE up until this point. When time came to face Parliament on the relative failure of the Supervisory Board and the former current who knows what interim managers, then we end up with the Prime Minister in front of us. Not that I don't mind, like you coming to Parliament, Prime Minister, it's always good to see you. But it's curious to me, because I guess if the vibe I'm getting is correct, then the plan is to, I guess, put the de facto shareholder rep as the shareholder rep, and then I guess maybe that private land in Hopi State can be, you know, incorrectly seized for whatever project is in mind. Madam Chair, through you to the Prime Minister, could Parliament please receive the 4-page letter that the Supervisory Board provided to government on the 29th of March regarding the background information and status of the attack, as mentioned by the Prime Minister in her timeline remarks when last we had this meeting, just to kind of do a comparison between the timeline that was in the leaked Aurora Infotech report and the timeline provided by the former interim IT manager in the leaked, not leaked letter of today. Have the proposed replacement supervisory board members been sent to the Corporate Governance Council as yet through you, Madam Chair, to the Prime Minister? And is it government's intention to, I guess this time around, accept and adhere to the CDC's advice regarding SBOD members for GB, since the previous advice was ignored last year and contributed to how we got here today? Beyond that, Madam Chair Lady, it's unfortunate that much of what I gathered from the answers received today, and even the answers to my own questions, is that a lot is still being worked on, explored, pending, almost 8 months after a crime, a cyber crime was committed against Country St. Martin. So I'm hoping that perhaps we can, as the Prime Minister said, institute a regular meeting every other 3 weeks or so, where we can receive more frequent updates on what is happening at GEBE. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the time.
Thank you, MP. Yes, I would allow it. Prime Minister, you would like to? There's a question that the Prime Minister. You'll send him to her? Okay, perfect. Next on the speakers list, we have MP Christophe Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair, I don't really have much questions to that at all. But I remember asking the Prime Minister about the collaboration project that GEBE is having with the police force, putting up these cameras. Madam Chair, in the area of South Reward, right across from the vocational school, they came to install a pole. GEBE came to put down a pole, and they dug the ground and they broke the pipe. And when we called GEBE and we told them about it, they came and they clamped the pipe. It is still leaking, still running water all day, every day. We called them yesterday, we called them the day before, and nothing is done. So it's not a direct question to the government, really. It's just that I have Troy in front of me. So I think this will go directly to the source in terms of them coming and getting that fixed. In addition to that, Madam Chair, I would like to ask through the Honorable Prime Minister, because again, she'll have to probably use her sources. If you have the general public who applies for a building permit, and with that building permit, you have a div number and everything, and the word is that the permit is sitting on the minister's desk. Yet, individuals already have their bank loan paying interest and everything, and they're waiting on this building permit because, Madam Chair, GEBE would not move in terms of installing the electrical meter until they get in building permit. I would like to ask the Honorable Prime Minister, what's the next step for that individual to do? What's that next step for that individual to do? I thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Manuel. Next, we have, I have MP Ludmila Duncan, but I would have to skip, as she's not here at the moment, so I will now move over to MP De Weaver. You have the floor.
Well, it was on already. I apologize, the mic. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a lot, actually. Yes, yeah. I don't have a lot, but the MP before me, Gums, was referring to a leaked, not leaked document from today, which I received from several persons. One document was in Dutch from a law firm. The other one was in English regarding the temporary manager of GB and then appointed COO of GB, who is now out. And when you look at the document, if we're going to talk about timelines, significant information was actually missing from it. If I deem it to be accurate and complete and reliable and actually from the person it came from. And I'm actually just going to assist through you, Madam Chair, the Prime Minister and the Special Representative, Mr. Washington, and give you a little bit of insight as to what happened with the IT. So the former financial auditors, external auditors, as well as which became a consultant, they actually wrote up procedures for the IT department of NVGB. These are procedures where 6 of them was finalized and approved by management during, I think it was about maybe January or February 2020. But what's important to remember of this, and this is where I'm going to give it to you, and if you all want the the 6 policies and procedures that were written by an external firm for the IT department. They are: 1, information security policy; 2, change management policy and procedure; 3, GB user management procedure; 4, GB incident management; 5, GB backup procedure; 6, GB data ownership policy. The one that was being discussed, where the COO, head of IT, had to finalize with managing board at that time, was actually the data recovery, because it was said that he wanted to add some insight. So when you're going to throw blows at people, make sure be real, because when a parliamentary inquiry comes here, when you come and you say untruths, then you are going to be committing perjury. So this is just the lifeline I wanted to send off to the Prime Minister and Mr. Washington today, to ask for the procedures that came from the external auditor or the external consultant that was helping them back in 2020, which was done in conjunction with the sort of accusations that are being held. I wanted to make sure that that information was received or is requested by the Prime Minister and Mr. Washington, to make sure that they have an absolutely complete and honest and truth coming from what was done internally. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP De Weaver. Next, we have MP Angelique Rameau. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I had some questions from the former round, but I'm going to re-ask some questions because I'm not quite sure what went wrong. So, as far as the Supervisory Board of Directors is concerned, as far as the audit was concerned and the financial statements of GB, you talked about audits, and the question I have, and it's a bit confusing in terms of the answers that were already given, and my colleague here talked about it not being a hack. The instruction to be given to the auditors, how will that take place? As it pertains to the payments, the ongoing issues that were pertained to the invoicing, if that could be further explained. As you know, and I don't know if that was touched on today, there's still a lot of complaints still ongoing as it pertains to the billing. What is the current approach being taken as far as that is concerned? Especially seeing that the company indicated that they were going to resume the collections, and they did start. We're still hearing numerous customers indicating that they're still not receiving invoices. So what is the actual situation as it pertains to that? And as it pertains to government as the shareholder, do you intend on giving any instructions such as an inquiry or the audit of the Supervisory Board of Directors? And those are my questions. I thank you, Madam
Thank you, MP Rameau. Next, we have MP George Pandeflet, but as it appears he's not present, so the next one on the speakers list is MP Rolando Bryson. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to one and all once again. Madam Chair, I do have to, I found it interesting to kind of get the sentiment from some who are indeed, like one put it, my phone hasn't been ringing off the hook like it was a couple months ago, you know, when it relates to GB. And that's a very anecdotal sign, but it's probably a sign nonetheless that perhaps we have at least brought some sense of calm to what is happening at GB. However, I do, Madam Chair, to you, want to encourage the temporary manager to not rest on his laurels because he started off excellent. I read the statement that I think a press release that came out kind of talking about what GB needs to focus on, you know, what GB's core principles are with regards to customer service and understanding that, you know what, yes, we've been through a hard time, but we're going to put the focus back on helping every individual customer and empowering the employees. I really enjoyed that statement. That's the type of statement I think we and all of us in Simon have been waiting from GB. Not a combative sort of, yeah, but you gotta compare. No, like, look, this is a situation. This is how we're gonna try and fix it. Yes, we know things didn't go as well. Excellent, excellent statement, and congratulations to the entire GB team, whoever was involved in putting that statement out, because I think that contributed very, very significantly to even the tone that you get on this side of the aisle today. Madam Chair, I do still want to come back on an issue of so I asked a question about the shareholder reps, and Madam Chair, I'm sure the Prime Minister can attest. This member of Parliament and her, the coalition partner of the Prime Minister, and I think you yourself, Madam Chair, would know, this issue of me understanding why it is we have a government that has not appointed shareholder reps is not something I've brought up a month ago or a few months ago or even a year ago. I just need to understand that if a government believes that they can have the entire Council of Ministers involved in being the overall shareholder, and that is effective, then please tell me so, and I rest my case. But what we've seen is that an arm's length approach has its pros and its cons. That's all I'm saying. Because an arm's length approach indeed allows the entity to not have the political influence that in the past has caused significant problems. But an arm's length approach also causes the problem that when disaster strikes in any of those entities, now you don't have the people that were directly involved in direct regular communication to say, hey, you were in communication, what was happening? So, Madam Chair, this is not something that came up in no negotiation or like that. This is something that I believe we have as a principle, that we want to see our government most effectively manage such important entities like the harbor, the airport, GB, BTP, the hospital, etc. Because today it's GB, it seems that the situation is getting closer to being resolved. What happens if it's the harbor tomorrow? Then is it the Prime Minister again going to be the one to have to come to Parliament and tell us what's wrong there? Or BTP, or you know what I mean? That, in my opinion, is not an effective manner of functioning. And if I have the confidence, and I say I have confidence in this government to be able to do so, well, then I expect the Prime Minister to have confidence in her ministers as well, to say, hey, let's get this done. But with measured approaches, of course. I don't think it needs to be willy-nilly like how it was done in the past. I've decried that sort of behavior in the past that has happened. I point out 6 things that I believe should be involved in a shareholder rep. Attend Parliament meetings on the topic, meet with the board of government-owned entities, regularly reporting to the COM, scouting board members and bringing those to the COM for approval, so not doing it on your own, drafting resolutions to be approved by the Council of Ministers, and overseeing whether the entity is operating in line with good corporate governance and the governing program. Madam Chair, I don't think that's too much to ask. And you see what you hear, and this is what I wanted to avoid. When you're going to have people referring to de facto shareholder reps, it causes a confusion for us members of Parliament indeed. Because when is he a shareholder rep and when is he not? What is he mandated to do or what is he not? We need clarity as the members of Parliament as well on how it is. When we call a meeting, is it from now on going to be just the Prime Minister is going to come for all 17 of the government-owned entities? This is a situation that needs to be addressed and needs to be clarified. And just like MP Marlin said, if I try in private, I try in meetings, I try in emails, then at a certain point, I have to bring it on the floor. Because I'm not getting the answers to this question and the solution to this situation that I want. Madam Chair, other than that, I also, in terms of cybersecurity, one of the things that I also wanted to point out, this is well, I guess it's for the Minister of TIAT, but we have the Prime Minister here. The Bureau of Telecommunications and Posts is part of the organization known as CANTO. And CANTO also has an organization that is, I think it was set up by the CARICOM called the CERT, C-E-R-T. And the CERT is actually a cybersecurity specialist. What I would like to ask of the Prime Minister, not really a question, but please collaborate with the BTP to see whether the CERT, they do cybersecurity studies via the local telecommunications overseers, so like in our case, the BTP, and they can do a full Caribbean assessment of where you are in terms of cybersecurity in your country. So I'd like to ask the Prime Minister to please look into that aspect as well. And also just one simple question, what is the role, if any, of the VDSM, the National Security Service, in developing cybersecurity policies or investigating cybersecurity attacks in St. Martin? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. Next, we have MP Peterson, but he's not in today. So I will move to the final speakers on the speaker list, Mr. MP Hyacinth Richardson. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to my colleagues. Good afternoon to the good people of St. Martin. Madam Chair, it might be more a statement that I'm going to make, but it's a statement or statements that I want the government to look at serious concerning GB. There's many different levels. We know that there are two ministers that is practically over GB, and that is the Minister of Lomi and also the Prime Minister. Madam Chair, I would like to have the lower salary scale persons in GB to be looked at. And why I'm saying that, because these persons work hard also. And since GB is a monopoly company on the dot side, I definitely wouldn't like to see them in the back burner or left behind and not making a decent salary with the cost of living. So I would like to hear a statement coming back from government on that, because there's some tension with workers, most likely, and I'm not calling any name here now, that is not happy with the salary that they're making, and they work very hard. So I would like the government to look into that, and also Mr. Troy Washington, who has just gotten the position, and I know him well from a young man, and I'm proud to say I believe he'll be doing a great job for St. Martin and GB. The other area I would like to mention is the claims department. I would also like the government and the management team of GB to look in that seriously, because there are some persons claim their appliance have been destroyed because of sometimes when current goes on and off and it comes back, and they are not getting answers from GB on that. So I really want government to look into that area, and if there's 100 claims out there of people who have sent in letters, please look into that, take it serious, and answer them and solve their issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Richardson. We have come to the end of the questions in round 2, Madam Prime Minister, and I would like to know if should I take an adjournment for us to discuss how we're going to move forward with the answering to the questions? Brief adjournment? Let's take a 3-minute adjournment to discuss. Meeting adjourned for 3 minutes. Welcome back, members of Parliament. I just took a brief adjournment to caucus with the Prime Minister, and it appears she would need some time to respond to the questions posed in round 2. So with that, members of Parliament, I would like to adjourn this meeting until the week of the 24th of October, and then we'll see exactly what day we can fit in to reconvene this meeting. This meeting is adjourned, and I would like to wish everyone a wonderful weekend. I know I'll be enjoying my weekend. Meeting adjourned until then, and happy weekend, everyone.